Hello there, everyone. Today I'm going to bring back a golden oldie of spiritual practice. A very, very long time ago, when man first became aware of his own thoughts, man became aware that there were two perspectives inherent within himself. There was the experiencer, and there was the observer of the experience. This came to be known as the experiencer, being the body or the ego, and the observation of the experiencer being the soul or consciousness. And voila, spiritual practice was born. In most ancient religious and spiritual traditions around the globe, one of the very first spiritual practices is to become aware of the observer self. In fact, you would be hard-pressed to find one religious or spiritual practice that does not include this idea of becoming aware of the observer of your current life experience. So why is it that I am bringing this golden oldie back if we've evolved so far beyond the primary religions and spiritual traditions of this planet? The answer is, frankly, it works. It worked then, and it still works today. To give you a little better understanding of what I mean by the observer self, consider the following scenario. Consider that when you have an experience, say you're in the middle of a disagreement with someone, you can be completely in the experience, where you are fully immersed in the feelings of anger, and the thoughts about the experience are very real. Thoughts like, "It's all your fault, you idiot." But you could, conversely, be observing the argument and your reactions to the argument. When you do this, instead of being fully immersed in first-person perspective in the argument, and being the anger or the thoughts, you could simply watch them as if from third-person perspective. When you do this, you are not fully immersed in the experience. You are watching yourself being immersed in the experience instead. This is a practice in detachment. Detachment, which is different than escapism from what is occurring, can allow us to remain fully conscious so that we may choose to respond instead of react to situations that occur. It also helps allow us to transcend the limited perspective of the direct experience so that we are more objective instead of subjective relative to our life experiences. I will tell you that when people seek to spend all of their life experience in this objective perspective, it may seem like they have reached a state of enlightenment, when in fact the opposite is the case. They are using this objective perspective to avoid experiencing the subjective reality of their life experience, because they're afraid to feel. That being said, the people, who are the majority of people on Earth, who spend all their time in the subjective viewpoint of their respective realities, are cut off from the objective view of their own lives. They can't objectively view their own consciousness, and thus they are less aware. So I will be the first person to tell you that we need to develop the ability to switch between the subjective and objective way of viewing our life experience. Because the majority of the people on this planet are already very adept at experiencing the reality from a subjective, first-person perspective, what they need in order to enhance their spiritual practice is to begin to see their life experience from third-person or observer perspective. For this reason, we practice mindfulness. And one of the best ways to develop mindfulness is by practicing mindfulness meditations. For this reason, I'm going to introduce you to one of my favorite mindfulness meditations today. To begin this meditation, I want you to find a calm place, somewhere that you feel comfortable. I want you to make yourself comfortable seated in whatever position feels right for you. And then I want you to close your eyes and put your attention entirely on your breath. Breathing in and breathing out. When you're initiating your meditative practice, it's a good idea to pick something to do each time. One of the main reasons why we begin meditative practices so often by focusing on the in-breath and the out-breath is because pretty soon your brain will form an association between the breathing and the meditative state. And so all it takes, almost like a trigger, is for you to pay attention to your breath, for the mind to switch its frequency and start going into a state that is conducive to your meditation. So back to this mindfulness meditation, we can watch the breath for as long as we feel is right to do. And then gradually we shift our attention to observing what we are perceiving in our external reality. If you wish, you could leave your eyes open and include sight in your perception, or you could leave them closed and merely pay attention to the rest of your sensory faculties. So if I was to do this meditation right now, what I would begin doing is just noticing the sounds in my environment. When I begin to notice them, I will then start to label them. It's almost like I've stepped out of the perspective of just experiencing, and now I'm observing and naming what it is that I'm perceiving. So in my scenario right now, I might say, birds. I hear the sound of an airplane. The sound of a truck. The bark of a dog. If I placed my attention then to what I am smelling in the environment, I might say something like, smelling soil, feeling the crisp air in my nostrils. If I was to then switch my perspective to the feeling experience, meaning tangible physical feelings, I might say, pain in the arm, the feeling of the earth underneath me. The point of this phase of this particular experience is that we are observing the external world that we are participating in. In the next phase of this particular meditation, we switch our attention to the thought level of our reality. So we objectively observe our own thoughts. All we are wanting to do is to become aware of our thoughts. We do not want to change them. We're not judging them as good or bad. We're simply noticing them and labeling them. For example, if I notice myself thinking this is stupid, I might say, thinking a negative thought. If I notice myself thinking this feels so good, I might say, thinking a positive thought. Or I can label what kind of thinking it is that I'm observing. For example, if I notice myself think, God, he's such an idiot, I might say, judgment or blaming. If I notice myself think, oh my gosh, I think I just left the gas on, I might think, worry. I want to remain disidentified with the thoughts themselves and simply watch them pop up and naming them for what they are. Even though you are observing me verbally express what it is that I'm perceiving in my reality, it's not necessary for you to do that. But it's just important that even on a mental level, internally to yourself, you are naming and recognizing those things that you are perceiving. Then after a time, when I feel ready, I'm going to switch my attention squarely to the level of feeling experience. To do this, I'm going to pay attention first to the sensations that are occurring in my internal world. When you're observing thoughts, it can feel like the thoughts are out here, yet again an aspect of your external reality. At this particular point, the most important thing is that we shift that focus, that observer, to the internal world. So now, I am focusing on sensations such as burning in the solar plexus, tingling in the foot. Perhaps at this point you will notice emotions. You can label those as well. Things like frustration, tension, despair, or even joy. The good news about this particular experience is that if your mind begins to wander, as it so often does during meditative practice, you don't need to judge or condemn yourself, because you can observe that as well. Simply say to yourself mentally, mind wandering. And when you bring it back, mind coming back. You can spend as much time as you would like to in this observer state, in this meditation. But it's my suggestion that if you're just beginning this practice, you begin with no more than 10 minutes. It's very difficult for the mind that is not acclimatized to a state of mindfulness to stay focused on something like this for longer than 10 minutes. You want to work it just like a muscle, not overwork it. And then you can start extending the period of time that you stay in this observer consciousness beyond 10 minutes. You can extend it for as long as you wish. When you are ready, you can simply bring your attention back to the subjective reality, and you can put your attention back on the breath, watching the in-breath and watching the out-breath. When you're ready, you can open your eyes once again. The aim of this particular meditative practice is to remain disidentified, or to not identify, with the things you're experiencing, with the thoughts that you're thinking, and the feelings that you are feeling. You're just wanting to spend time in this observer state where you are simply allowing everything in your subjective reality to be there. One of the main reasons that this particular mindfulness practice is one of my very favorites is that it's particularly good for the beginner. What we will find as our mindfulness practice develops is that pretty soon it will be able to take place in a state of silence. State of silence means there is no external commentary, meaning talking, and there is no internal commentary, meaning thinking. The mind will literally just release itself to a state of observation instead of commentary. But in the very beginning, when your mind is used to having a job to do, this is a very tall order. This particular mindfulness practice gives the mind just enough to do, being that it is going to notice, observe, and label the things that it is observing, that the mind can get out of its own way, get out of the way of being, and allow you to exist in a state of observation. Gradually, as you feel the muscles of your mindfulness developing, you can start to add silence to your experience of observing. So you are literally simply observing without labeling what you are observing is a state of complete non-judgment. I will leave it up to you and trust you to discern exactly when you are ready for that particular practice. What you will notice is that just like working a muscle, you will begin to become more objective in your everyday perspective. Your ability to observe will be honed like a skill that you can use anytime you wish. It will start to be easy, not just in meditation, but even in your day-to-day life. This is particularly helpful when you're in the midst of a conflict. To be able to become mindful enough to be objective about whatever you are experiencing allows you to be conscious about the choices you are making and the ways you are responding to your life, to yourself, and to others. Developing a state of mindfulness ensures that you are not just sleepwalking through your life, you are instead completely awake to life. So I'm going to put forth the perspective that it is a very good idea for us to develop the ability to surrender to the subjective experience and to completely be with ourselves, immersed in the experience that we call life. It is also very important for us to develop the ability to be objective and to observe ourselves experiencing life, so that we may at once experience our temporal self and our eternal self. Have a good week. Difficult for a mind that is not acclimatized or used to this mindfulness state. We're starting over. I got distracted by a squirrel.